The thing about humans, I learned that day, is that they keep pets that can kill gods. My name is Vekara, and I'm a Threxian, which means I have 4 eyes, 6 limbs, and the good sense that evolution gave a species that survived 3 extinction events. What I didn't have, apparently, was the good sense to avoid getting assigned to the same Xenobiology class as Mira Kessler, the only human at Galactic Academy Station 12. Look, I want to be clear about something right up front. I didn't hate Mira. Hate would require caring, and most of us didn't care about the human girl who sat in the back row, always wearing that weird smile like she knew something the rest of us didn't. She was small, even for her species. Soft, pink-skinned. She had these strange brown eyes that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it properly, and hair the color of burnt copper that she kept tied back in what she called a ponytail. We just thought she was harmless. Big mistake. Enormous mistake. The kind of mistake that gets your name added to historical records under the heading, "Idiots Who Should Have Known Better." It started on a nothing sort of morning. Station 12 orbits a Class G star in neutral space, designed specifically so different species can study together without anyone's government getting nervous. The collective built it 300 cycles ago, all gleaming metal and recycled air, with gravity generators that could accommodate everything from hydrogen breathers to rock eaters. Our xenobiology professor was a Quintari named Bix Toran, who had the personality of a malfunctioning calculator and the teaching style of someone actively trying to bore students to death. Bix had this thing about showing off, about making sure everyone knew Quintari were the smartest species in the collective, which, fine, they probably are. They've got brains the size of cargo containers and enough redundant neural pathways to run 17 thought processes simultaneously. But being smart doesn't mean you're not an absolutely insufferable jerk about it. That morning, Bix was droning on about Earth biology, which apparently fascinated them because Earth biology makes absolutely no sense. See, most planets settle into a comfortable equilibrium. Predators evolve to be efficient. Prey evolves to be adequately defensive. Everything finds a balance, stops trying to kill everything else quite so enthusiastically, and the ecosystem achieves stability. Earth? Earth said screw that noise and decided to run a 4-billion-year arms race where everything tried to murder everything else in increasingly creative ways. The human homeworld? Bix was saying. Their translator rendering their clicking mandibles into flat, emotionless collective standard, represents a statistical anomaly. Death world classification. Gravity, 1.2 times standard. Oxygen content dangerously high. Atmospheric pressure excessive. Weather patterns catastrophically unstable. And yet, somehow, humans evolved. Not just survived, but thrived. A few students shifted nervously. Death world. Everyone knew what that meant. Most species came from garden worlds, places where the weather behaved itself and the wildlife had the decency to not be actively homicidal. Death worlds were places where the planet itself was trying to kill you, where you had to fight for every meal, where weakness meant extinction. Only 3 species in the collective came from death worlds. The Kraliks, who were basically living tanks covered in armor plating. The Mordresh, who could survive vacuum exposure for short periods. And humans, who looked like they'd blow away in a stiff breeze, but apparently had somehow clawed their way to the top of their food chain through sheer, bloody-minded stubbornness. Today, Bix continued, we will discuss Earth fauna. Specifically, the bizarre evolutionary choices that led to creatures of seemingly disproportionate lethality relative to their size. That's when Kravik, a Zelthian sitting 3 rows ahead of me, raised one of his primary manipulator limbs. Kravik was, to put it gently, an absolute waste of oxygen. Rich family, prominent clan, the kind of person who thought being born lucky meant being born superior. He had scales that shimmered purple under station lighting and a personality that shimmered like a sewage leak. "Professor," Kravik said, his voice syrupy with false respect, Is it true that humans keep death world predators as companions? For emotional support? Several students laughed. It did sound ridiculous when you put it that way. Dix's multifaceted eyes swiveled toward Mira, who was sitting in her usual spot, back corner, looking like she was trying very hard to become invisible. That is correct. Humans have domesticated numerous species that would be classified as dangerous fauna on any rational world. Canines, felines. Some even keep reptilian predators. How adorable, Kravik said, turning to look at Mira directly. The Death World primitive keeps Death World pets. Does it help you feel less alone, human, having something as violent and backwards as you are? I winced. Look, I wasn't Mira's friend. Threxians don't really do friends with other species. It's not prejudice. It's just cultural. We stick with our own. But even I could see that was unnecessarily cruel. Mira didn't react. She just sat there. That same small smile on her face, fingers drumming a quiet rhythm on her desk. Vekara, displaying the moral backbone of a particularly cowardly jellyfish, said nothing. Just continued the lecture. Earth canines, Vik said, were derived from pack-hunting predators called wolves. Through selective breeding over thousands of cycles, humans created hundreds of variations, from creatures small enough to fit in a human palm to specimens massing over 70 kilograms. All retain predatory instincts to varying degrees. I bet the human has a tiny one, Kravik said. Apparently not. Done being a complete oxygen thief. Something small and yappy. Matches her energy. More laughs. Louder this time. Felines, Bix droned on, ignoring the disruption entirely, represent an even more peculiar choice. Obligate carnivores, retractable claws, excellent night vision. Humans domesticated them despite felines showing markedly less loyalty than canines. Some researchers theorize humans enjoy the challenge of earning a predator's affection. Kravik leaned back in his seat, really getting into his role as class bully now. So, what is it, human? Canine or feline? Or maybe you have one of those reptiles? Something cold-blooded, like you? That's when Mira finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. Neither. Kravik blinked. What? I don't have a dog or a cat, Mira said. She was still smiling, but something about that smile had changed. It had gotten wider, sharper. I have a honey badger. The classroom went silent. Professor Bix-Toran's translator actually stuttered. You? You have a what? A honey badger, Mira repeated, casual as anything. Her name is Duchess. Now, I should mention that at this point, none of us had any idea what a honey badger was. It sounded cute, honestly. Honey. Badger. Like some kind of sweet, fuzzy creature that maybe collected nectar or something. We were so catastrophically wrong about that. Kravik started laughing. A badger? The human brought a badger to school? What's next? Are you going to show us your pet hamster? I could, Mira said thoughtfully. But Duchess gets cranky when she hasn't had breakfast, and she already ate my roommate's synthetic meat rations and the container they came in, and part of the shelf. Something about the way she said that made my thermal pits tingle. That's a Threxian thing. When we sense danger, our thermal sensors start picking up heat signatures more intensely. It's an old prey response, from before we evolved tool use. Right then, every thermal pit on my body was screaming at me that I was in the presence of a predator. Surely, Bix-Toran said, and I could hear actual concern in their voice now. You don't actually have a live Earth creature in your quarters? That would violate station regulations, specifically Code 773-4, which prohibits keeping undomesticated fauna in living spaces without proper containment and permits. Oh, Duchess is domesticated, Mira said. Sort of. I mean, her great-great-grandmother was wild, but Duchess was born in captivity. She's practically tame. That, practically, was doing a lot of work there. I want to see it, Kravik announced. Because of course he did. If this badger is so impressive, bring it to class. Show us this magnificent Death World predator. He said it like a challenge, dripping with sarcasm. Mira's smile got even wider. Okay. That should have been everyone's first clue to run. Professor Bix-Torin tried to backtrack. That would be highly irregular and potentially dangerous, not to mention against multiple station regulations and safety protocols, so perhaps we should reconsider this course of action and instead focus on theoretical study using holographic representations rather than live specimens, which could pose a threat to student welfare and station integrity. But it was too late. Kravik was already riling up the class, and about 15 students were now chanting for Mira to bring her pet. Young people of all species are idiots. It's a universal constant. Tomorrow, Mira said, standing up and gathering her materials. I'll bring Duchess tomorrow. You all can meet her. She left the classroom, still wearing that smile. I should have transferred classes right then. The next day, word had spread. Our Xenobiology class, which normally had maybe 20 students on a good day, now had 47 people crammed into it. Students from other departments, a few instructors. Even station security sent someone, a Draknor named Vekara, who stood in the back looking extremely unhappy about his assignment. Professor Bix-Torin tried one more time to stop this disaster. This is highly irregular, and I must formally protest the violation of academic protocols and safety standards, which exist for very good reasons developed over centuries of interspecies educational cooperation, and which should not be discarded simply to satisfy juvenile curiosity about exotic fauna. Nobody was listening. Kravik sat in the front row, looking smug. He'd brought friends, other Zelthian students, all wearing the same expression of superiority mixed with anticipation. They were expecting a show, expected to watch the human girl get humiliated when her dangerous pet turned out to be some harmless furball. The door opened. Mira walked in, carrying a pet carrier. It looked like a standard model, reinforced plasteel with ventilation slots and a handle on top, about half a meter long. Through the slots, I could see movement, something dark and furry. The room fell silent. Everyone, Mira said cheerfully, setting the carrier on Bix-Torin's desk. Meet Duchess. She opened the carrier door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Duchess emerged. She was maybe 60 centimeters long, covered in coarse fur that was black on her back and white on her face. Small, rounded ears, short legs, a thick, muscular body. She looked, honestly, kind of adorable in a scrappy sort of way, like someone had taken a regular earth mammal and compressed it slightly. Kravik started laughing. That's it? That's your terrifying Death World predator? It looks like a carpet with legs. Duchess turned her head to look at him. I cannot adequately describe the expression in that animal's eyes. I've seen Kralik's warriors before battle. I've watched Mordresh survivors emerge from ruined ships. I've observed apex predators from a dozen worlds sizing up prey. None of them had eyes like Duchess. Those eyes said, very clearly, I have decided you are food, and I am going to eat you, and nothing in this universe will stop me, and I'm going to enjoy every second of it. Kravik's laughing stopped. Duchess is a honey badger, Mira said conversationally, like she was discussing the weather. They're from Earth. The scientific name is Mellivora capensis. They mass between 7 and 16 kilograms, depending on gender and regional variation. They're in the Mustelidae family, which also includes wolverines, weasels, and otters, though honey badgers are generally considered the most aggressive members of the family tree. Duchess hopped down from the desk. The sound her claws made on the metal floor sounded like knives scraping steel. Honey badgers have extremely thick skin, Mira continued. Her tone was cheerful, educational even, about 6 millimeters thick on the back and neck. It's tough enough to resist most predator bites, including from lions and hyenas. It's also very loose, which means if something grabs a honey badger, the honey badger can twist around inside its own skin and counterattack. Duchess started walking toward the students. Not quickly, just a casual stroll, like she was inspecting her domain. Students started backing up. They have powerful jaws and very sharp teeth, Mira went on, strong enough to crunch through turtle shells and bones. They're also incredibly strong for their size. A honey badger can dig through hard soil, break into beehives, and tear apart prey animals much larger than themselves. Duchess stopped in front of Kravik, who had gone very, very still. She sat back on her haunches and stared up at him with those nightmare eyes. But the really interesting thing about honey badgers, Mira said, and her voice had gone softer, almost intimate, is their temperament. See, most animals have a healthy sense of self-preservation. They avoid fights they can't win. They back down from larger predators. They run from danger. Duchess opened her mouth, showing teeth that looked far too large and sharp for an animal that size. Honey badgers, Mira said, don't have that instinct. They don't back down. Ever. There's documented cases of honey badgers fighting lions, leopards, hyenas, Cape buffalo, African elephants, humans with guns. They don't assess threats. They don't calculate odds. They just decide they're going to win, and then they try to kill everything in their path until they do. Someone in the back of the room made a small, terrified sound. Oh, Mira added, like she just remembered something trivial. They're also mostly immune to venom, cobra venom, mamba venom, scorpion stings. A honey badger can get bitten by a snake that could kill an elephant, pass out for a few hours, then wake up and finish eating the snake. Their metabolism is ridiculous. Duchess made a sound. Not a growl, exactly. More like a rattling, hissing snarl that bypassed the thinking part of your brain and went straight to the part that screamed run. Half the class was now pressed against the back wall. Kravik, to his credit, tried to maintain his dignity. It's just an animal, a small one. What's it going to do? Gnaw on my ankle. Mira's smile turned absolutely radiant. Want to find out? No! That was Professor Bix-Torin, who had apparently rediscovered their spine. Absolutely not. Miss Kessler, please return your companion to its carrier immediately before someone gets injured or killed or worse. And I have to file 17 different incident reports with station administration and possibly deal with interspecies diplomatic complaints. Duchess suddenly lunged forward. Not at Kravik. At the desk. She grabbed Bix-Torin's stylus, a metal implement about 20 centimeters long, and bit it in half. The sound of metal crunching was very, very loud in the silent classroom. Duchess spat out the pieces and made that rattling hiss again. Oops, Mira said. Sorry, Professor. Duchess gets excited around new people. Everyone's shock, Duchess immediately trotted back to Mira, who scooped her up like she was an ordinary pet. The honey badger's entire demeanor changed instantly. She nuzzled against Mira's chest, making almost purring sounds. She's actually very sweet once she knows you, Mira said, scratching behind Duchess's ears. She just needs time to warm up. And maybe you should probably avoid sudden movements, or loud noises, or looking threatening, or smelling nervous, or existing in a way she finds annoying. The security officer, Vekara, stepped forward. His hand was on his shock weapon. Miss Kessler, I'm going to have to cite you for bringing a dangerous animal into a public space without proper authorization and safety measures. Is she dangerous? Mira asked innocently. She hasn't hurt anyone. She destroyed station property and threatened multiple students. Did she, though? I mean, she broke a stylus and took a walk. That's not really threatening anyone. That's just existing while intimidating, which isn't technically illegal. I had to admit, the human had a point. Vek's soul looked like he wanted to argue, but technically, Duchess hadn't actually attacked anyone. She'd just been herself, which happened to be absolutely terrifying. Return the creature to your quarters, Vekara said finally, and keep it there. If I see it in common areas again, without a proper exotic animal permit, which costs 12,000 credits and takes 6 months to process, I will have it removed to quarantine facilities. Understood, Mira said. She put Duchess back in the carrier, latched it, and picked it up. Then she turned to face the class. Anyone else want to mock the human girl's pet? Silence. Absolute, complete silence. That's what I thought, Mira said. Then she left. The classroom erupted into chaos the moment the door closed behind her. Everyone talking at once, some species chittering or clicking, or making whatever sounds indicated distress in their particular biology. Kravik looked like he'd aged 10 cycles in 10 minutes. Professor Bix tried to restore order, but nobody was listening. We were all too busy processing what we'd just witnessed. I sat there, my thermal pit still screaming danger signals, thinking about what Mira had said, about how honey badgers don't back down, don't assess threats, just decide to win and then make it happen through sheer, bloody-minded ferocity. And I thought about how humans came from a death world, how they'd survived and thrived on a planet that was actively trying to kill them, how they'd climbed to the top of their food chain not because they were the biggest or strongest or fastest, but because they were the most stubborn, because they simply refused to give up, to back down, to accept limits. Humans kept honey badgers as pets, not because honey badgers were harmless, but because humans recognized something in them, something familiar, something that said, this creature, this small, scrappy, absolutely insane creature that will fight anything regardless of size or danger, this creature is like me. That was the moment I realized that humanity's acceptance into the collective might have been a mistake. Not because they were primitive or backwards or violent, though they were definitely all those things, but because they'd looked at one of their planet's most notoriously aggressive predators, a creature that was basically rage compressed into fur and teeth, and said, I'm going to be friends with that. And they'd succeeded. What else might they succeed at, if they set their minds to it? I was still thinking about that when the emergency alarm went off 3 hours later. The alarm was not a drill. I knew this because Station 12 had 3 types of alarms. The polite chime that meant scheduled maintenance, the firm beep that meant actual drill, and the soul-shredding shriek that meant something had gone catastrophically wrong and everyone was probably going to die. This was the third kind. My communicator buzzed against my secondary appendage. Emergency broadcast, station-wide. Text only because apparently whatever was happening was bad enough that they didn't want panic in people's voices, making it worse. Containment breach. Section 7. Biological hazard. All students report to designated safe zones immediately. Section 7. That was the Xenobiology research wing, where they kept samples, specimens, things from various worlds that scientists studied under very controlled conditions with very thick walls between them, and everything else. Emphasis on kept. Past tense. Apparently not anymore. I ran. Threxians are good at running. 6 limbs means excellent stability and speed when you need it. I made it to Safe Zone 3 in under 2 minutes, joining about 60 other students who looked various shades of terrified depending on their species' emotional expressions. Kravik was there, scales pale with fear. So were most of our classmates from Xenobiology. Not Mira, though. I scanned the crowd twice. No human. Professor Bix arrived looking more rattled than I'd ever seen them. Is everyone accounted for? Someone check the roster, please. This is extremely important, and we cannot afford to have missing students during a biological containment emergency, which could result in casualties or worse. A Flanari student named Tisk pulled up the class list on her datapad, cross-referencing with the bodies present. Her face went gray. Professor, 3 missing. Jorvax, Mira Kessler, and Zimrath. My thermal pits went cold. Jorvax and Zimrath were both Drachnor, big species, heavily built, Natural armor. They could probably handle themselves in a crisis. Mira was human, soft, fragile, and somewhere in the station, while something dangerous was loose. "What got out?" someone asked. "What are we dealing with?" Victorin's translator made an unhappy clicking sound. "I am not at liberty to discuss classified research projects, but I can tell you that the creature in question is from a swamp world in the outer reaches and possesses significant predatory capabilities, including acidic secretions, remarkable speed, and a hunting strategy that involves ambush tactics." "How big?" "That was Kravik," voice shaking. "Approximately 4 meters long, massing roughly 200 kilograms, with reinforced exoskeleton plating and multiple sensory organs adapted for low-light conditions." Someone whimpered. 200 kilograms of acidic nightmare with armor and bad intentions? Fantastic. Just absolutely wonderful. "Security is handling it," Victorin added quickly. "Station protocols are in effect. We simply need to remain here until the all-clear is given, which should hopefully be soon, assuming the creature can be contained or neutralized without significant property damage or loss of life." I couldn't stop thinking about Mira. Where was she? Her quarters were in Section 4, which meant she'd have to cross through Section 6 to reach Safe Zone 3. Section 6 was adjacent to Section 7. If the creature had gone hunting, that's exactly where it would go. Maximum coverage, multiple corridors, plenty of hiding spots, perfect ambush territory. 20 minutes passed, then 40. The communicators stayed silent, except for one update. Situation ongoing. Remain in safe zones. Someone's stomach gurgled. A few students had pulled out rations and were stress-eating. I tried to settle my thermal pits, calm my nervous system. Didn't work. I kept imagining that human girl, alone in a corridor, facing down something designed by evolution to be an efficient killer. Then, my communicator buzzed. Private message. From Mira. Asterisk. Hey Vekara. Quick question. If something has an exoskeleton, where's the weak point? Joints? Underside? Need to know soon. Kind of busy. Asterisk. I stared at the message. Read it 3 times. Typed back with trembling appendages. Asterisk. You're not actually fighting that thing. Please tell me you're not fighting that thing. Asterisk. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Asterisk. Define fighting. If I'm just defending myself and Duchess happens to be helping, is that fighting? Or is that self-preservation? Asterisk. I made a sound that doesn't translate well into human languages but essentially means, you have got to be kidding me. Asterisk, you brought the honey badger? Asterisk. She was in my quarters. I couldn't just leave her there. What if the creature broke in? That had made trained security officers nervous. That belonged to a species famous for fighting things 20 times their size. Defenseless. Right. Asterisk. Underside. Asterisk. I typed quickly. Asterisk. Exoskeleton. Species usually have softer ventral plating. Joints are also vulnerable. Sensory organs if you can reach them. Where are you? Asterisk. Section 6. Junction 12. Thanks. Gotta go. Asterisk, and then nothing. I sat there, staring at my communicator, while my brain tried to process what was happening. Mira was in Section 6, with Duchess, apparently planning to take on a 200-kilogram acid-spitting armored nightmare from a swamp world. This was insane. Completely, absolutely insane. I stood up. Where are you going? Victorin demanded. Students must remain in safe zones until the all-clear is given per station emergency protocols, which exist to prevent unnecessary casualties and chaos. Bathroom? I lied. Biological necessity. Can't be helped. I was out the door before they could argue. Look, I'm not a hero. Threxians aren't hero material. We're survivors, pragmatists. We assess risk and make logical choices. Going toward danger instead of away from it violated every instinct I had. But Mira had asked me for help, and something about that quiet request, that casual, "Hey, quick question," while I'm about to fight a monster, made me feel like if I stayed in that safe zone, I would regret it for the rest of my life. Plus, honestly, I wanted to see what would happen when a human and her deranged pet faced down a swamp world apex predator. Scientific curiosity. That's what I told myself. Section 6 was empty. Emergency lighting had kicked in, bathing everything in red. My thermal pits were going crazy, picking up heat signatures from the environmental systems, the walls, everything bleeding together. I moved carefully, keeping my footfalls quiet. A sound echoed down the corridor. Hissing, clicking, the scrape of something hard against metal flooring. The creature. I froze, pressing against the wall, trying to become invisible. My camouflage reflex kicked in, skin shifting to match the metallic gray around me. Threxian evolution at work. When big scary things show up, disappear. The creature rounded the corner, 4 meters of nightmare, 6 legs, each ending in wicked claws. A long, segmented body covered in overlapping plates of chitin that gleamed wetly under the emergency lights. Multiple eyes on stalks that swiveled independently. And a mouth, stars above. That mouth. Mandibles that looked like they could shear through bone, dripping with something that hissed when it hit the floor. Acid. Of course it had acid. The creature paused, sensory stalks waving, searching, hunting. Then, from behind it, a voice. Calm, almost cheerful. "Hey, ugly. Over here." Mira stepped into the corridor from a side passage. She was wearing what looked like maintenance coveralls, heavy-duty material designed to resist chemical spills. Smart. In her hands, she held a plasma cutter, the kind used for repairs, modified somehow. Jury-rigged. The tip glowed blue-white. The creature spun, faster than anything that size should move, and lunged. Mira dove sideways, rolled, came up already moving. The plasma cutter scored a line across the creature's flank. Chitin cracked. The thing screamed, a sound like metal tearing. Then Duchess hit it from behind. She'd been waiting in another corridor, because she came in like a furry missile, claws extended, teeth bared. She latched onto the creature's rear segment and started tearing, just absolutely going to town, ripping at the softer tissue between armor plates. The creature spun again, trying to shake her off. Couldn't. Honey badgers, as Mira had explained, have loose skin. They can twist and turn inside their own hide. The creature couldn't get purchase, couldn't bite her, couldn't scrape her off. Duchess just held on and kept destroying. Mira used the distraction, ran in close, shoved the plasma cutter directly into a joint where leg met body, held it there. The smell of burning chitin filled the corridor. The creature shrieked again, lashing out with its mandibles. One caught Mira across the shoulder. Those coveralls saved her life, but she still went flying, hit the wall hard, slid down, didn't get up. No, I moved without thinking, grabbed a piece of broken piping from a damaged wall panel, charged forward, brought it down on one of the creature's eye stalks. The stalk burst, fluid sprayed. The creature turned toward me, and I saw my death in its remaining eyes. Then Mira was back up, limping but moving. "Vekara! Ventral side! Help me flip it!" Flip it. She wanted to flip over 200 kilograms of angry alien predator. Sure, why not? What's one more insane thing today? The creature lunged at me. I dodged, barely, Felt acid spray passed close enough to singe my outer skin layer. Pain flared. I ignored it. Grabbed another leg joint with my secondary limbs, pulled with everything I had. Mira hit it from the other side. Wedged the plasma cutter under its body like a lever. Pushed. Now! I pulled. She pushed. Duchess continued shredding from the top. The creature went over, crashed onto its back. The ventral plating, as I'd told Mira, was softer. Not soft, but softer. More vulnerable. Mira didn't hesitate. Drove the plasma cutter straight into the center. Mass. Held it there as the creature thrashed. Kept holding it even when acid sprayed, even when mandibles snapped inches from her face. Just held on, jaw set, eyes focused. Duchess dropped from above, landed on the creature's head, and went for the remaining eye stalks with systematic efficiency. Pop, pop, pop. 3 eyes gone in as many seconds. The creature's movements became erratic, random. It was dying. Mira pulled the plasma cutter out, stepped back, watched until the creature stopped moving. Then she sat down, just dropped right there in the corridor. Ow! Duchess trotted over, blood and worse things matting her fur, and climbed into Mira's lap. Made that purring sound. I stood there, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. We'd killed it. Actually killed it. A fully grown apex predator from a swamp world. Me, a Threxian student whose biggest accomplishment until today was not failing organic chemistry. Mira, a human who weighed maybe 50 kilograms, soaking wet. And a honey badger who apparently contained more concentrated violence than most military weapons. You came, Mira said. She was bleeding from the shoulder, and probably had cracked ribs, but she was smiling. Why? You asked for help, I said. It sounded stupid. Simple, but it was true. Most people wouldn't have come, would have stayed safe. Most people, I said, don't get private messages from humans asking where to stab things. She laughed, winced, stopped laughing. Fair point. Security arrived 3 minutes later, led by Vekara, who took one look at the scene and actually went pale, which is impressive for a Drachnor. What? What happened here? It attacked us, Mira said calmly. We defended ourselves. Station regulations allow for self-defense when life is threatened, correct? Vekara opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. You killed a Morphax Ravager, with a plasma cutter and a maintenance tool. And Duchess, Mira added. Don't forget. Duchess. She did most of the work. The honey badger, still covered in various fluids that definitely violated several health codes, made a happy chirping sound. Vekara looked at me. And you helped them? She needed information about exoskeletons, I said weakly. I'm a Xenobiology student. It seemed educational. Several other security officers had arrived. They stared at the dead Ravager. At Mira. At Duchess. At me. One of them took a holopicture. For evidence, probably. Or possibly because nobody would believe this without visual proof. Medical is on the way, Vekara said finally. You're both injured and need immediate treatment. The creature is dead. The breach is contained. This incident will require extensive debriefing and possibly a formal inquiry, but right now the priority is your health and safety. Paramedics arrived. They tried to take Duchess away from Mira. The honey badger made it very clear that wasn't happening. So they treated Mira while Duchess sat on her lap, glaring at anyone who got too close. My burns weren't bad. 1st degree. Mostly. They sprayed something that numbed the pain and started tissue regeneration. Told me I was lucky. Lucky. Right. The all-clear sounded station-wide about 20 minutes later. Students started emerging from safe zones. Word spread fast. By the time they transported us to Medical Bay for full examinations, there was a crowd outside, watching, staring, pointing. I heard fragments of conversation. The human killed it. With a badger? And a Threxian helped. Deathworld species. Absolute madness. Kravik was there. He looked at Mira differently now. Not with contempt. With something closer to fear. Respect, maybe. Hard to tell. Professor Bix-Toren arrived at Medical Bay an hour later. Miss Kessler. Vekara. I have been informed of your actions during the containment breach, and while I must emphasize that engaging with dangerous fauna rather than evacuating is strictly against station safety protocols and could have resulted in serious injury or death, I must also acknowledge that your intervention likely prevented multiple casualties and contained the threat efficiently. Is that a thank you? Mira asked. Her shoulder was bandaged, ribs wrapped, but otherwise she seemed fine. Humans heal fast. Death world advantage. It is an acknowledgement of facts, Bix-Toren said stiffly. However, I will note in my official report that both of you demonstrated remarkable courage and quick thinking under pressure, which are qualities that the Galactic Academy seeks to foster in students, and which reflect well upon your respective species' contributions to the collective. That was absolutely a thank you, just buried under a mountain of formal language. After Bix left, Mira looked at me. So, want to partner up for the rest of the semester? I could use a lab partner who knows which end of a predator to stab. I thought about it, about what partnering with a human would mean, the attention, the questions, the inevitable chaos that seemed to follow Mira wherever she went. Then I thought about that moment in the corridor when she'd asked for help, and I'd actually gone. When I'd stopped being just a survivor and become someone who ran toward danger instead of away from it. Sure, I said, but I have one condition. What? When you bring Duchess to class again, and I know you will eventually, you warn me first, so I can bring protective gear. Mira grinned. That same smile from before. But now I understood it. It wasn't smugness, it was confidence. The absolute certainty that, no matter what the universe threw at her, she'd figure out how to throw it back harder. Death world species. Humans who kept honey badgers as pets, and fought monsters with plasma cutters and sheer stubborn refusal to die. The collective had no idea what it had invited into its ranks. But I was starting to. 3 days later, Station Administration issued a new regulation. Exotic animals were now permitted with proper documentation, but required assessment by security before being allowed in common areas. They called it the Duchess Protocol. Mira framed the official notification and hung it in her quarters. Kravik transferred to a different Xenobiology section. Never spoke to Mira again. Some of the other students who'd laughed that day kept their distance too. But others, the ones who'd been paying attention, who'd seen what happened when you pushed a human too far, they started treating Mira differently. Started sitting near her in lectures, asking questions, wanting to know more about Earth, about humans, about what it meant to come from a world where everything wanted you dead, and you survived anyway. As for me, I learned something important, something they don't teach in standard collective education. Never underestimate a species that domesticated wolves, befriended cats, and kept honey badgers as emotional support animals. Those aren't the actions of a sane, reasonable civilization. Those are the actions of a species that looked at danger and said, I can make this my friend. And if they can do that, they can do anything. 2 weeks after the incident, Mira brought cupcakes to class. Earth food, baked herself. They were actually pretty good. She also brought Duchess, who now had proper documentation and a small vest that said, Emotional Support Badger. The vest was a joke, obviously, but the honey badger wore it with dignity, sitting on Mira's desk while we discussed comparative anatomy of exoskeletal species. She only tried to bite Professor Bix-Toren once, and that was because Bix got too close to Mira's cupcakes. Fair, honestly. At the end of class, Mira pulled out a small device. Oh, almost forgot. I made something. She pressed a button. A holographic display appeared showing the fight with the Ravager, reconstructed from security footage. Thought you might want a copy, Vekara, for your portfolio. Practical application of xenobiology principles in real-world scenarios. Should look good on graduate school applications. I took the data chip she offered. On it was the footage, plus her notes on Ravager anatomy, weak points, effective countermeasures. It was actually incredibly thorough. Better than most academic papers. "Thanks," I said. "For this? For everything?" "Thank you," she replied. "For showing up when it mattered." Duchess made a happy chirping sound. And that's how I became friends with a human and her nightmare creature. How I learned that sometimes the scariest thing in the universe isn't the 4-meter armored predator from a swamp world. It's the soft, small, supposedly harmless species that refuses to back down. That keeps pets capable of fighting lions. That survives and thrives in conditions that would kill most other life forms, humans. They're absolutely insane. I wouldn't want them any other way. In the classroom, they mocked the human girl. Her honey badger made us tremble. But more than that, it made us understand. Made us see what we'd missed, what we'd underestimated. Earth didn't just produce survivors. It produced warriors who looked like civilians, predators who smiled politely, apex species who asked nicely before demonstrating exactly why you shouldn't have messed with them. And now, they were here, in the collective, bringing their pets and their death world instincts and their absolutely unshakable conviction that any problem could be solved with enough creativity, stubbornness, and occasionally a honey badger. The galaxy would never be the same. Honestly? Good. It was getting boring anyway.